Welcome to Odyssey of the Mind, our first official training. We are so glad you could join us today. We will be talking about many different topics today, but our first one will be what will 2020 OM look like in 2021? And Martha Ranji is going to lead you through that for us.
Hi, I'm Martha Ranji, President of Oklahoma Creativity, Inc., and we provide Odyssey of the Mind here in Oklahoma. We're so glad that you will be involved with the OM this year. We couldn't have the program without our outstanding coaches. Now, this year has been crazy with all that's been going on, and the season is going to look a bit different than it has in past years. But we think that this program is so important to students that we want to make sure that Oklahoma kids have the opportunity to be involved in Odyssey of the Mind. It's the Board of Directors' plan this year to have an in-person qualifying regional tournament, and that will be on Saturday, February the 28th. Now, the actual location of the tournament has yet to be announced. It will be in the Edmond, Oklahoma area. The flow of the tournament will be a bit different. In past years, kids have had all day until it's time for them to show their long-term solution to get everything ready. But this year, they will have 30 minutes to get their stuff ready to compete. They will then enter the staging area and visit with the staging judge, and then they will have 8 minutes to present their solution. They will then visit with the officials, and then they will exit the building and take all of their props and stuff and sets with them. We do want all teams that perform to video their performance, and that way if we do have to pivot to world finals, to virtual world finals, all teams will have a solution already videoed that they can submit if they qualify. We're not going to allow any other teams to watch any other team compete so that we can keep the number of people down in the room. We just feel like that's the better solution and a good social distancing practice. We will have a built-in window between each team so that will allow the judging team to be able to wipe down the area and clean the area prior to the next team entering the room. Unfortunately, we will not have any souvenir sales available at the regional tournament, but we will set up an online store, and that will allow you guys to participate in the souvenir sales where you buy pins and shirts and things like that, and that does benefit us directly, Oklahoma Creativity, Inc., so that we can continue Odyssey of the Mind here in the state. Now, the top 6 teams in each problem in each division will advance to the state tournament, which will be held on Saturday, March the 28th. We do know that kids want to be recognized for their hard work. I mean, they put in months and months on their solutions. So our answer to that is that we will, the day of the regional tournament, have a virtual awards assembly. And we will do that via Zoom. And that way the kids will be recognized for their hard work. We will announce how the team's placed and who will be advancing to the state tournament. And then we will post all of the scores on our state website. In past years, we posted all those on the walls and let all the teams go out and see what their scores were. Obviously, we won't have that opportunity, so we will post those scores on our website that day after the regional competition. Now, if something does come up and we do have to change plans for the state tournament, we will let you guys know as soon as possible. We really want to keep you in the loop, but that is our plan for the year, and we hope that will allow these kids to show their talents. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being involved.
All right, so next up, we have a section on coaching resources, and I am going to switch over the camera to Melissa, and she is going to guide you through some information on the website and on Facebook, because I know with virtual being a huge possibility this year, we want the coaches to have as many resources as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and switch this over to Melissa.
Good morning, everyone. Just to give you a couple of great resources for our Odyssey of the Mind. We have on our website, oklahomaoem.com, there is a Coach's Corner. There's a lot of information out there. All of the handouts that we normally hand out at an in-person training session are available there. We post, there will be posts on there about how to register, things like that. But probably one of the really great resources that we have is our Facebook group. It is a closed Facebook group, so you can only join if you are a coach. It's not available to parents to join. The kids certainly are not allowed to join that Facebook group. But within that group, we post and share things from Odyssey HQ. If there are clarifications that come out, we try and post those there. And also, it's a great place for you as a coach to ask questions. And it's a safe place to do that because it is just coaches. And you have at your disposal all of the coaches that are probably experiencing some of the same challenges that you are. I know last year when we switched to virtual, there were a lot of questions about how are you guys doing this? And also, it will be a great place that some of our ongoing coaching sessions will be held. Last year, we did Facebook Live sessions. Patty and Wendy did a phenomenal job with Facebook Live sessions. And it was a great place that, you know, when you sat and watched it, allowed you to ask questions during that particular session. And I believe all of those videos are out there if somebody is, you know, really excited and wants to go watch those. Let me look at my notes here. On the Facebook, on the group page, we also post tournament details, registering. So a lot of the things that you'll see on the website will be duplicated on the Facebook group page. We also have a public Oklahoma Odyssey of the Mind Facebook group, and things are posted there as well, but it's not the place for a coach to really ask questions. That's in the coach's Facebook group page. Okay, Patty, back to you.
So the next thing, this is that website that she is talking about, and you'll notice that the Coach's Corner is highlighted in red right there. That is the area where you can find a lot of different coaching resources. And then the next page, what she was talking about on that Facebook page, we have a ton of resource tools for you. There is a new sheet that we posted. We gave it out at the coaches meeting last year, made a few changes to it, and it is effective coaching tips. These are listed on Facebook, and they will be listed, I believe, on the Oklahoma website under the resources section. There are some long-term solution tips, some spontaneous coaching tips, style and how to enhance it. These 4 things are an extremely, extremely important pieces of information for you. They come from a group of coaches that have coached for several years. It's nothing you will find anywhere else. It is truly something that has been put together by a team of long-term coaches, which can really help you as a new coach. There are things maybe you don't think about. There are things that will specifically help you when you start to coach. Odyssey Academy is another brand new training out there, and it is amazing. It is on our Odyssey the Mind Facebook page, or I'm sorry, our coach's Facebook page. There is a training that takes place on this, and it's 15 different topics. We're going to preview the first one today. It's very well put together, and just about anything you could need help with is in one of those 15 topics, and they are really, really good. In some of our trainings later, we will show some of them because they are that great. But if you get a chance or you're struggling in an area, this is a great resource to go to. Facebook also shares a lot of the information from other coaches asking questions. So maybe that question that you're just kind of afraid to ask, other coaches are probably having that same exact question. So always ask, it's a good thing. And then we'll also list each scheduled training on there as we go through. I'll give you a list of those today, but we will go through that one. Okay, so our next topic is going to be, what is OM? Okay, and it's one of the Odyssey Academy ones. But first I want you to jot down our tournament dates if you have not done that already, or if you're using a phone today, you could take a snapshot on your phone to remember those dates. Our location for the regional tournament has not officially been announced yet. We are in the progress of nailing that down, but our state tournament will be at Oklahoma State University, who we love. Go OSU. Hope they win today. Okay. So what is Odyssey of the Mind? All right, I'm going to go ahead and show you this. It's a great piece of information for brand new coaches, experienced coaches, and just a great reminder for all coaches of what we need to be doing.
The goal of the program is to help new students, new teams understand what the Odyssey of the Mind School program is all about, how to start a long-term problem and solve a long-term problem. If you don't yet know what that word means, when I say long-term problem, what that term is, don't worry about it, because as part of this series of videos, we're going to teach you what long-term problem means and all the other vernacular for Odyssey of the Mind. So that'll become second nature for you as you learn the program. So let's go ahead and get started. This very first lesson is pretty straightforward. We're just going to introduce OM, or Odyssey of the Mind, right? So we like to call Odyssey of the Mind OM in the program. And as you become familiar with Odyssey of the Mind, I bet you too will start calling it OM. So on today's agenda, what we're going to do is talk about what OM is as a school program. We'll talk about what divergent thinking is, which is sort of the underlying philosophy of the OM school program. We'll talk about STEAM education. You're probably familiar with that. Maybe you've heard it before, but Odyssey of the Mind has been doing STEAM education for well over 40 years. So we were kind of ahead of the curve on that. We'll talk about who else does OM around the United States and also the world. It's a global program. And then the big part is talking about the three components or the three parts of Odyssey of the Mind. Let's go ahead and get started with the very first question, which is, what is OM? So Odyssey of the Mind, or OM as we like to call it, is an educational creative problem-solving program for students K through 12 and also universities. So there are university students that participate in Odyssey of the Mind as well. I have referred to it as a school program, but you should know that other groups that aren't school programs, like the Girl Scouts or community organizations or homeschool programs, have also and can also compete in Odyssey of the Mind. So it started more as a school program, but it's opened itself up so that students of all types, young kids of all types, can actually participate in the program, even if not through a school extracurricular. The way it works is teams will form of students, up to 7 students actually on a team. What you'll do is, when I say solve a problem, you'll solve what we call a long-term problem. Now we're going to dedicate an entire lesson to what a long-term problem is coming up in the future. Just know right now that the long-term problem is the heart of the OM program. It's what students spend weeks to months working on. In terms of solving some creative open-ended problem where they can display their innovation and their ideas in a really fun, compelling way. So then what you'll do once you solve the problem is you'll present your solution at a competition. Now you don't have to compete if you participate in OM, but most teams do. And competitions take place at the local regional level, if there are a lot of teams nearby, and then you advance to the state or association level. And then if you win at the state level, you get to advance to what's called the World Finals. And that's where teams from all over the world, from 30 different countries, come to the United States and share their solutions. So it's kind of cool to watch all these teams from around the world share different solutions to the same problem. And you get to meet a lot of cool new friends from around the globe. One point I want to make here with Odyssey of the Mind is OM is more than just a destination, right? Odyssey is called Odyssey of the Mind because we know that the journey is what matters. So while it's nice to go to competition and maybe you win a trophy or a prize of some kind, that's great. We love when teams do that. The real highlight for those of us helping volunteer to run the program is watching the students grow, watching them require teamwork skills, social skills, self-confidence skills, taking their ideas from their brain and making it a reality. These are important life skills that we teach in the program. It's just that we have a lot of fun while we're doing it. So that's the gist of the Odyssey of the Mind School program. If I had to summarize it more succinctly, I would just say it's an extracurricular activity that supplements or complements traditional classroom education. And here's the cool part. If you think of all the other clubs that students can be a part of, whether it's drama club, engineering club, math team, debate, any of these things, Odyssey of the Mind is sort of all of these clubs rolled up into one organization. Because in Odyssey of the Mind, you're going to be doing artistic things. You're going to be debating your ideas with your team members. You're going to be performing your ideas. You have to check in on history and the classics problem. So there's all sorts of ways that everything that we know and love about extracurricular activities get rolled up into one in the OM School program. I know, as somebody who participated in the program for 10 years and who did all these other organizations you can see on your screen, to me, Odyssey of the Mind was the most influential in my life just because it was so comprehensive and it requires the students, so me at the time, to do all of the work, right? Mom and dad, parents, coaches, you can't help. Like the kids have to do all the work. So whereas other programs at school, like drama, had a director who were, telling students what to do, this, you are the director, right? In debate club, where you had your debate advisor who would help you find your points and make your argument, and Odyssey of the Mind, you're the debate coach, right? So in this sense, it really forces the students to gain self-confidence, to know where their limitations are, know where their strengths are, to work together as a team to produce a really high quality solution. So OM is pretty special in that regard because it's so comprehensive and includes so much in one school program. All right, so moving on, Odyssey of the Mind promotes this notion of divergent thinking. So what is divergent thinking? That's a big word, especially if you're a young elementary school student watching this. What does it mean to be a divergent thinker? Well, let's talk about this. So the philosophy of Odyssey of the Mind, the philosophy of divergent thinking is there's no one right solution to a problem. So I'll repeat that. Divergent thinking is the belief that there is no one right solution to a problem. Now, you want to contrast this with convergent thinking. So if you have divergent thinking over here and convergent thinking over here, these two different things. Convergent thinking is when a problem has one correct answer. Everybody agrees that's the one correct answer. That's convergent thinking. So an example of a convergent problem would be, what is 1 + 1? Hopefully, if our mathematicians have done their jobs, the answer is 2, right? Now, we can try to be creative and come up with different ways 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, but by and large, the standard acceptance is that 1 + 1 = 2. There's a convergent, correct response to that, right? If we were to say, what year did Columbus sail the ocean blue? The convergent response would be 1492, as the rhyme goes. So convergent thinking really hones in on a specific single accurate point, whereas divergent thinking thinks, there's any number of possible solutions to solve this problem. So let's illustrate this with an example. So if I ask you the question, how could you cross a small pond? Probably the first thing that comes to mind, as for most people, would be a little rowboat, right? So the answer here is, of course, just get in a boat and row across the pond. That is great, and that is a convergent answer. We'd probably all converge on this idea that using a rowboat to cross a pond is a good idea. But Odyssey of the Mind is a little bit different. It's teaching divergent thinking, right? So let's think of other ways we wouldn't normally just assume or jump to right away that we could use to cross a pond, different solutions for this. So in this case, maybe we use helium balloons to raise some device across the pond. Maybe we freeze the pond and then skate across it on ice skates, right? Maybe we build a bridge to cross the pond, which is, of course, what humans do. Maybe we make a rope swing that allows us to swing across the pond like Tarzan. Any of these solutions would also get us across the pond, but they weren't the first one probably that came to mind. So the idea in Odyssey of the Mind in the OM program is we want to teach young minds to think divergently. Of course, it's great that they can converge on a right answer, but we want them to think of all the possible right answers because this helps teach innovation and helps them create new things, which is important. All right. Moving on, so STEAM education has been a buzzword in education for the past decade at least. The cool thing is Odyssey of the Mind has been doing STEAM education for about 40 years, so a lot longer than STEAM has been in fashion. Now, in school, in traditional school, you know your subjects, reading, writing, arithmetic. There's also some science in there, some history in there, and all of those are great. Odyssey of the Mind is meant to build on top of what students are learning in their traditional classroom. So what does that mean? Well, it means things like learning how to be creative, learning creativity. What does creativity even mean? We're going to talk about that in a future lesson. What is teamwork? how do I work well in a team? How is it when other people have good ideas that are just as good as my own, can we come together to figure out which solution we should actually move forward with, right? Innovation, making your ideas real, from going from your mind to an actual tangible reality. And if we pause and think about this, when we become adults, for many of you that might be several years from now, for some of us it's already happened, you have to use these skills in the workplace every day. It doesn't mean you're not using math or reading. Of course you are, right? But you're also trying to be innovative. You're trying to come up with creative solutions when there's a budget or a time constraint. You have to work with a team almost always, right? There are very few jobs in this world where we don't work together with other people. So what we're trying to do in OM is teach these fundamental life skills that are going to have a profound impact on the future of Odyssey of the Mind participants. So STEAM, in case you're unfamiliar, stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics. And as I said, what's very cool about the OM program is it's literally a hands-on program that gets students using and applying science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, right? So if they're building a structure that holds weight, a balsa structure that holds weight, they're talking about architecture and measuring and the science behind weight-bearing loads, things like this. If they're in classics and they're looking into history to understand how mythology can be updated or tells the stories of today, well, they're using their skills in the arts, and maybe they're building a technological device that goes along and demonstrates that myth in a super innovative way. So whatever problem students choose to solve, and we'll get to those in a second, they're using the STEAM skills that are so valuable, that we know are so valuable, in addition to skills like teamwork and creativity that will serve them very well in their career. What do you actually do in OM? This is a pretty important question. There are three core components of the Odyssey of the Mind program, right? So repeat that. There are three core components of Odyssey of the Mind. So the first component is what we call the long-term problem. All right, and I have these point totals here. I'll explain them in a second. So the long-term problem is the meat, the heart of the Odyssey of the Mind program, and I'll describe it in a bit more detail in just a second. So that's part one. Part two is something we refer to as style. And you'll notice that the style box is overlapping the long-term box. And the reason for that is that these are presented at the same time. When teams present their solution, style and long-term are kind of part of the same component, but they're treated a little bit differently, right? So if that sounds confusing, don't worry. Just know that there's long-term and there's this thing called style. And we'll talk more in detail about that in just a second. The third component is spontaneous. So long-term, style, spontaneous. That's it. Those are the three things in Odyssey of the Mind. I'm going to describe each one of these separately in a moment, but just know, if anyone ever asks you, what are the three parts of OM? Long-term, style, spontaneous. Those are the three. Now, the point total here is if you were to compete in Odyssey of the Mind, of course you get scored. There are judges. We'll talk about competition in a later lesson. But the total possible points you can get each year is 350 points. And the point breakdown is presented here, right? So the long-term problem is where the bulk of your points will be. That is 200 total points. Style is an additional 50 points, and spontaneous is an additional 100 points. So when you're thinking about competition, and again, we'll go into competition detail in a later lesson, just know that you have 350 points you're going for, and this is how they break down. So let's talk about each component separately. So the long-term problem, as I've said throughout, is the heart of the OM program. Teams are going to spend weeks to months solving their long-term problem, and the long-term problem can be anything under the sun, right? So one year I remember we had to take a Shakespearean story and update it to a modern time period, right? Another year we had to take a story from a list of famous stories and turn it into a musical full of choreography and original music, right? Some years you have to build vehicles that complete different tasks without the team members touching the vehicle. So the problems vary from year to year. The one thing that stays the same are the problem categories. So what I've had listed here, or what I have listed here, are the 6 problem categories. So problem 1 is always vehicular. Problem 2 is always technical. Problem 3 is always classical. Problem 4 is always structural. Problem 5 is always theatrical. And problem 6 is always the primary problem. So what do I mean when I say that problem 1 is the vehicular problem? What it means is that the teams every year in problem 1 will be creating a vehicle of some sort. Now, what that vehicle looks like or what's required changes from year to year. So the specifics of the long-term problem changes each year. One year, the vehicle problem might require that the team members ride on the vehicle and complete tasks. Another year, it might be that the team has to build 3 small vehicles that do something on an obstacle course. So regardless, every year, problem 1 has something to do with transportation and vehicles. And same thing, problem 2, every year has something to do with building a technological device of some kind, right? More of a very engineering slant to the problem. What the specifics are, changes year to year. Classics, same thing, always incorporate something from history, right? So maybe it's about civilization, maybe it's about famous people from history, maybe it's about famous works of art. Any of those things are the source material for the classics problem, but the specifics of the classic problem change year after year. Now, I want to point out that problem 6, or category 6, primary, is only open for kindergarten through 2nd grade students. And the idea for the primary problem is it's an entree, it's an entry into OM, so that young students learn the ropes of the program, kind of how it works. They can come to competition and perform. They're not scored, right? They get feedback, but they're not in the competition, so to speak, just so that they have an understanding of how OM works. So then that way, when they're old enough, they can start competing in the other 5 problems. And I want to point out and highlight here, teams only solve one problem. So if you're panicking a bit, thinking, oh my gosh, I have to build a vehicle, I have to write a classical skit. No, you have to only choose one problem, right? So maybe this year you do vehicle and you design and build vehicles. Maybe next year you decide to do classics and you perform a lovely musical that's based on a biography of someone from the past. The idea here is that you're only choosing one problem. You're not solving all of these 6 problems that are presented here, right? This is for illustration. Cool. So that's that. You can see teams performing their solution here. We'll talk more about what the actual solution, how it works, what it looks like, and what you're expected to do in a later lesson. All right, moving on. So we have long-term. Now we have style. So what is style? Now remember, I said style is related to long-term, but it's a little different. Now I'll explain why there might be some confusion. So the long-term problem is going to require the teams to do certain tasks within set limitations. And we're going to talk specifically about long-term in its own lesson. Style is, in addition to what the long-term problem is asking, what do we as a team want to do to make our own unique mark on our solution? All right, so it's completely separate from the sense that if we're being scored for 10 things in long-term, we're not going to be scored on those things for style. We're going to choose our own things, our own new costumes or performances or backdrops or technological devices. We are going to make those and choose to have those scored as style. And in doing so, we're going to create a unique sort of stamp that we're putting on our long-term solution. So that's what style means. If it's confusing right now, trust me, it's confusing even for teams that have been doing OM for a while. The good news is I have a whole lesson just on style in a later lesson. So we will talk in more detail about what style is. Just know, again, it allows teams to create their own unique stamp and do their own fun things that aren't required in the long-term problem as part of their solution. All right, and the last piece here, there's a style example. The last piece here is spontaneous. So spontaneous, unlike long-term and style, in which teams have weeks to months to solve, spontaneous is a surprise problem. So literally, the day of competition, teams will walk into a room and be given a problem to solve. Don't know what it is, have no advance warning. They'll be given a couple of minutes to think or to plan their solution, and then a couple minutes to perform or execute that solution. We'll talk again in detail about spontaneous and the types of problems that exist. There's a whole lesson dedicated to spontaneous, but just know that the purpose of the spontaneous portion of Odyssey of the Mind is to test things like quick thinking skills, teamwork, creative problem solving, all these skills that team members have developed over the weeks and months of participating in the program, they get to put on full display in spontaneous. It's an improviser's dream, right? So spontaneous, you can see some students here working on a hands-on spontaneous problem. And again, when we talk about spontaneous in the spontaneous lesson, we'll talk about the specific problem types and how to practice and prepare for spontaneous. All right, so what is this course going to do? What is Odyssey Academy going to do, and what is participating in OM going to do for you, the student or parent, your child, teacher, your students? What it's going to do is going to teach you to be more creative, right? We're going to have a whole lesson on what creativity is, some tools you can use to come up with creative ideas. All of that will be covered in this program. You're going to learn how to brainstorm ideas, what brainstorming is, the best ways to brainstorm according to science. You're going to learn how to write a skit. So we're going to teach you some tools when it comes to performance-based skills that will help you as you're developing your own Odyssey of the Mind solution. You're going to learn how to be funny on stage. So believe it or not, we'll teach you how to be funny based on comedy tools that we know have worked for a long, long time. you will select and solve an OM problem. Ooh, sounds exciting, doesn't it, right? So what you'll do is you'll go to this year's current set of problems at the Odyssey of the Mind homepage. You're going to read through them, and you get to decide which problem you want to solve for this academic year, and then you're going to solve it. You're going to turn your ideas into reality. So after you've done your brainstorming, your creative idea generation, you're actually going to make these things happen, right? You're going to build your own costumes, your own backdrops, your own props, and you're going to perform your solution. That's the goal. And then finally, if you really want to, you'll compete. You don't have to compete, right? You can still do OM, go through the whole process and enjoy it and have fun and learn a lot of great things. But we encourage our students to go to competition because you learn a lot by going to watch other teams perform. You learn about teamwork, good sportsmanship. You learn how the same problem can have a number of different solutions that are also just as effective. So there's a lot of learning involved in going to competition as well, and it'll make you a better OM participant going forward in the future.
Okay, so at this point, I know that you guys are really excited to hear about the new long-term problems for the year. And so we are going to meet with each one of our coaches or our problem captains, and John Hoffman will explain the vehicle problem.
Good morning. My name is John Hoffman, and I'm problem captain for Omer the Roamer, also called the vehicle problem. So this year, the focus of the problem is on humor. So teams will design and build a vehicle that they can ride on. It takes a character on an adventure in search of humor. So that means the vehicle is going to be large enough to carry a person, and it needs to use stored energy to travel both forwards and backwards. At each stop defined by the problem, both the vehicle and the character will need to react to something humorous before traveling to the next destination. There will also be an unplanned stop where they take a selfie and show off a physical representation of the selfie and a vehicle-produced special effect. The problem will, so your team will need to also produce a skit around this with, you'll probably want multiple characters. There is a limited budget, $145. And so your team will need to recycle, reuse, and use everything they can to make interesting scenery, costumes, and the vehicle itself. One thing that you should be careful of is be sure to look in the program guide for the definitions of things defined in the problem, most especially the standard doorway, because if your vehicle is too large, you may be unable to get it into the competition area, and failing because you can't fit through the door would be very sad. So be sure to read the rules carefully and read the program guide for an explanation of what the specific words in the rules mean.
Okay. All right. We are, am I on mute? Huh. Okay. We are on number 2 with Richard Zamor. He is our problem captain for number 2.
Technical issues for a technical problem. Problem 2. Here we go. Okay. Virtual Odyssey is the name of it. I'm Richard Zamor. I'm the problem captain for Oklahoma for this problem. All right. I want to welcome you to it. All right. To give you an insight into what this problem is all about. Right. The spirit of the problem is for the team to create a performance about a character that begins in a real world setting and then unknowingly enters a virtual reality world. Okay, when this happens, a special effect will occur. And the character that enters the VR world will have to escape from a nefarious character. I love that word, nefarious character or creature, and earn credits in order to leave the VR and journey back to the real world setting. And the VR world will feature 3 technical effects produced by team-created devices, including making something change or appear to change, from 2D to 3D. Okay, the second one would signal when credits are earned. Bing, something like that. Don't use that, all right? Make something that will make that happen. And then, and then a free choice of a technical aspect. All challenging items, okay? The time limit for the solution presentation by your team is 8 minutes. This includes setup, style, the presentation of the solution. Time will start when a timekeeper says go or team begin, and will end when the team gives the signal that their performance has ended or the timekeeper says time. Okay. The cost limit, like John mentioned earlier for problem 1, this is the same, it's $145. This is the combined value of all materials used during the presentation of the solution, including style, and all this cannot exceed $145. There's more information about this in the program guide. Okay, kind of review, there are 2, 4, 6, 8 aspects of this problem that are necessary for the team to present: the VR world and the real world setting, 3 team-made technical effects, a character that unknowingly enters the VR world, the nefarious creature. Okay, 4 required credits, a journey back to the real world, right? A special effect indicating when the performance goes into VR, and 5 style elements, including 2 that are chosen by the team. Okay, I think that kind of sums up about everything that you might need to know in a short message about problem 2. I will emphasize, right, Odyssey of the Mind, it's a team-led program, right? The team makes the decisions on the creative product and the creative solutions involved in their efforts. Okay, good luck. I hope to see you at a competition soon.
Okay, so it's always exciting to hear about these new problems. As a previous coach, I'm always thinking, oh my gosh, how in the world are they going to solve these problems? So it's kind of funny that one's a virtual world problem. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that. All right, for problem 3, we have our problem captain, Sierra Whitmore, to present.
Hello, so I'm the problem captain for 3. So mine is Omer and the Beanstalk. So the spirit of the problem is to create an original performance depicting a youngster character that travels to a storybook land when a magic being grows into a beanstalk. A creative host will guide the youngster through the storybook land as they interact with characters and artistic representations inspired by objects from selected classic children's stories. Works of art will use Arm & Hammer baking soda as a material. They will also be a set piece that grows or appears to grow, while the youngster will learn a life lesson. So for this one, the time limit is again 8 minutes, and the cost limit is $125. Here the team will create an original performance that includes a special bean that transforms into a beanstalk and takes the youngster to storybook land, a youngster character, and I want to note that character is italicized so that you would have to look up in the program guide to determine how Odyssey of the Mind defines character, a creative host character, 2 classic children's stories selected from a list, a storybook land with 2 characters from the selected stories, 2 artistic representations of objects from the selected stories created out of or include Arm & Hammer baking soda, a set piece or prop that grows or appears to grow, an original life lesson learned in storybook land, and 5 style elements, including 2 that are chosen by the team. Some things to note as you're reading through the problem, more in depth on the different characters, is to note whether it has to be a team member in costume or if there's some other limitations on how that character can be portrayed. Also with the stories you can choose, normally they have stories and anybody from any division can choose them. This year there are 2 stories that only Division 1 can choose and 2 stories that only Division 2 through 4 can choose. And then there are 4 stories that any division can choose from. So, but you will have to choose 2 stories from that list to incorporate into your performance. One thing to note is with style, there is also the creative use of a round object in the performance, and then the artistic quality of a set piece or prop in the storybook land. And just to make sure that it is in parentheses there, but you cannot include anything that is included in the artistic representation of B5F, which is the artistic use of Arm & Hammer baking soda. So I think that's it. There's also a problem glossary at the very end that describes some other of the words that are in italics that are specific to this problem. So I'm excited to see everyone's solutions, and hope you guys have fun forming your solution to the problem as I do judging it. So bye.
All right, thank you, Sierra. That round object thing could get very interesting. I would love to see what they come up with for that. All right, problem 4 is going to be Mike Norris.
Okay, can you guys hear and see me?
Can't see. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, good, you can hear me. This is problem 4, the structure problem, and for most kids and coaches, it seems to be the most intimidating, and we don't get a lot of folks that like to do this one, but I think it's probably one of the better ones out there. The spirit of the problem is for the team to design, build, and test a structure made only of balsa wood and glue if they so choose, and to place as much weight as possible onto it. Before weight placement begins, the structure must attempt to trap a moving object. The team will present a humorous performance about an oblivious character that unwittingly avoids traps, and the narrator character that will explain each trap and the action as it's taking place. It's an 8-minute performance. You're limited to $135 on what you're allowed to spend. There's several things that need to be covered in this problem. Is number one, you've got to have a structure, and coaches, make sure that you read not only the program guide but the program for It's a Trap for the specifications for the problem. The structure must be big enough to fit over the pole in the crusher board. And I've seen in the past where it's not quite big enough to slide over. And it also has to have a minimum height of 8 inches. So, and it can weigh no more than 15 grams total. So make sure that the structure meets all those standards. It's going to have to trap a moving object, and the oblivious character unwittingly avoids traps. You'll have a narrator and a humorous theme, and you got 5 style elements, including 2 that are chosen by the team. So the team gets to pick 2 things that they want particular attention for the judges on style to pay attention to. And please, when coaches, when your teams come to staging, as best as you possibly can, have your paperwork completely filled out, and make sure that whoever on the team writes down what's on the forms, make it legible. We seem to have a problem sometimes with the younger kids that it looks like chicken scratch, and it's pretty hard to figure out what's going on. On the glue, I would suggest please bring the tubes or the containers that you use, and it has to have glue, epoxy, or something on the label so that we can see it, know what you're putting on the structure. It requires there is a caveat here. You can use any commercially available glue or adhesive that you wish to. It has to be used as it comes out of the tube. Now, there are some adhesives that are 2-part, like epoxy, where you have to mix 2 different elements in 2 different tubes. That's allowable. You can't use artificial strengthening on the structure. And when they come to weigh in, before the problems get started, is the weigh-in judge will not touch the structure at all. he and she, because it's a husband and wife team, will hand you the calipers and teach you how to, to use them, so that the judges will never touch the structure until after it's crushed. The key takeaways on this are: make sure the structure meets the specifications. You're going to have a couple of characters, one the oblivious character and the narrator. If you've got any questions, go ahead and send them in for program clarifications. And that way, you will get to see the answer for your program, for your question, but nobody else will. The only exception to that would be is if OM feels that question has been asked enough, that a general clarification needs to be put out. And have fun and enjoy. And that's, my presentation on problem 4.
All right. Thank you, Mike. The oblivious character in that performance, there might be some very creative characters in that role. So, and the problem, yeah, it's going to be exciting to watch. And the balsa wood structures are always interesting to see how world gets those problems to all come together for a new creation. So it's always interesting to watch that problem. Okay, next we have problem 5, and that will be Sarah Linder.
There we go. Had to unmute myself. I'm Sarah Linder. I'm the problem captain for problem 5. This year, our problem is called The Superhero Sucks, a Cliffhanger Beginning. The spirit of the problem is to create an original performance with a cliffhanger ending as it starts. So it begins at the end, but we've got places to go. And it shows a superhero character in a perilous situation by an adversary, that's placed in a perilous situation by an adversary character. The superhero gains power by putting on some super socks and escapes. There will also be an extreme weather setting, a humorous character, a sound effect that occurs when the superhero character activates the superhero socks. To add to the style of the performance, rubber bands will be used in a creative way. So that's kind of the spirit of the problem, but it's a good starting point for kind of what we've got going on. So it's 8 minutes is our time limitations, and our cost limit is $125 for problem 5. We're a performance problem, and kind of a rundown of some of the main required elements. You have the cliffhanger, what would be the ending as the beginning for our superhero character. And then we've got our superhero character, and we have these super socks, which activate the superhero's special power. So we actually need the visual representation of these super socks. And we have an extreme weather situation. There's already been a lot of questions about the extreme weather situation. It's extreme weather for the setting of the story. So it doesn't have to be an extreme weather situation for someplace in the US or, something of that. It's an extreme weather situation for the setting of the story and for the characters of the story. Then you have your adversary character, you have a humorous character, and then you have the sound effect for when the superhero socks are activated. That's kind of a basic rundown. This year, our style elements, the 2 required elements, the first element is a creative membership sign. So make sure to bone up those membership signs and that they look good because it's a required style element. The other required style element is the use of rubber bands in the solution. And so you're going to kind of have to specify those and explain how those add to the solution and the style of the solution. And then, of course, the other 2 are team choice. And the last one is an overall view. So that's your basic rundown for problem 5. Hope to see you guys at competition.
Thank you, Sarah. Some activated socks. That could get really interesting to see what they come up with. I have to watch that solution. All right. And the next one we are going to share. I'm going to go to a screen share, and Catherine Pickens could not be with us today, but she has created a video for us. So I am going to start her video here. Let me share.
Hi, my name is Catherine Pickens. I am the spontaneous problem captain for the state of Oklahoma. I am very happy to have all of you. Thank you for volunteering to coach. It's a big and important job, and I know that your teams are going to really appreciate all of your hard work. I am going to just talk to you for a few minutes about the spontaneous portion of the Odyssey of the Mind competition. Spontaneous is worth 100 points out of a total of 350 points on a competition day. So it's a decent chunk of your team's total final score. Spontaneous, like the name suggests, we don't know what it's going to be. I don't know what your kids are going to do, so I couldn't even tell you if I wanted to. But it's an opportunity for teams to think on their feet and do something kind of different, something that they haven't done before. Your biggest role as a coach for spontaneous is just to provide practice. So there are 3 different types of spontaneous problems, and I'll talk about those in just a minute. But basically, as a coach, the best thing that you can do for your teams is just give them opportunities to practice spontaneous. And the easiest way to do that is to Google Odyssey of the Mind spontaneous problems, and you will find tons of websites. There are books that you can buy, but there are lots of websites also that have free, easy to get examples. Some of them don't require any materials or any prep ahead of time. Some of them will require you to get some materials, but you can make it work for you. So if you don't have exactly everything, get close, and it will still be good practice for your teams. As far as spontaneous itself, a big change this year is that all members of the team get to compete in spontaneous. Previously, it was only 5 members of the team, but reading through the program guide this year, all 7 team members, if you have 7, get to compete. So that is the biggest change. There are 3 types of spontaneous problems that your teams may encounter. At the competition, they'll only do 1 of these, but they should be prepared for any of the 3. So basically, you have verbal problems, which, as it sounds, team members will verbally respond to some sort of prompt. So, for example, it might say, name 2 things that have something in common, and tell what they have in common. Team members can say anything. However, they get more points for creative responses. So an example of a common response might be red and yellow are both colors. A more creative response might be, I don't want to go to the principal's office or the dentist's office today. So the principal's office and the dentist's office have that in common. Verbal problems are a little bit more subjective, but our judges are really trained to be consistent in their judging, and they get judging guidelines as well for each problem. So that really helps a lot. On the other end of the spectrum, we have hands-on problems, which are almost entirely objective scoring. In those problems, could be all over the place, but you might need to make a tower and you get more points for making it taller. Or you might need to use these various materials to build a track and try to get a ball into a certain scoring area. There's so many variations. What they kind of all have in common is they use pretty standard household materials. So tape and toothpicks and paper clips, maybe some pipe cleaners. Nothing too crazy most of the time. So if you are trying to practice hands-on with your team, a lot of times you'll be able to with just materials that you can find in your junk drawer. And if you don't have quite all the things, you might be able to budget a little bit. Hands-on is pretty objective scoring. So they got this many balls in the basket, or the tower was however many inches tall. There are, in hands-on problems, scoring components for how well the team works together. So that's something, that's something you want to encourage with your team anyways, but in particular for scoring, that can be really important, as well as the creativity of the problem. So if they have a really tall tower, they'll get a lot of points for that. They might not get quite as high of a creativity score if they don't do it in a very creative way. Using materials in a different way can help with a creativity score. And then just things that you might not think of right away, that can help with the creativity score as well. When you're practicing those problems, it's a really good idea after maybe you've done a problem with the team to kind of talk about, well, what are some other ways that we could have done that? And that really kind of starts to get some of the creativity going. And then the third type of problem is a mixture of the two, verbal, hands-on problems. And like it sounds, there's some hands-on component and some verbal component. An example of this might be each team member has a book and they have some art materials that they need to use to make book covers. So they have a few minutes to make a book cover. They cover their books. And in the second part of the problem, they will give responses, descriptions, answer some questions about their book cover. So, they might try to give funny titles of the book cover, things like that. The specifics of that will be in the problem. When a team is doing a spontaneous problem, once they've come into the room, the judges will read them the problem. They also have a hard copy of it, so they can refer back to that. They can read along as the judge is reading the problem to them. So they always have that information right there of what they're supposed to be doing. They can also ask the judges questions. Judges will be kind of careful in how they answer questions sometimes because they don't want to solve the problem for a team, or they don't want to stop a creative idea. But they will, clarify rules and things like that. So those are the three types of problems. Just some things about spontaneous in general. It's a secret because if a team knows it ahead of time, that kind of defeats the purpose of having a spontaneous part of the competition. So only the team members are allowed in the room. No coaches, no parents, no cell phones, no cameras. So as a coach, when your team is doing spontaneous, you can just relax a little bit and watch their stuff. When they come out, they will not be able to tell you or anyone else what their problem was, what they did. You can ask them how they felt about it, if they enjoyed it. But any specifics, we don't want that. And ultimately, if your team is talking about those things and someone overhears, it's really just giving your team a disadvantage because someone who overhears might have more time to think about it and then be more prepared than your team was. So it's in your team's best interest. We do say that we don't want teams to talk about it until after the World Finals competition. And that is because spontaneous problems are used in all different states and different countries, and we all select from the same set of problems. And particularly with social media and things like that, it's very easy for that information to get out. So we might have a competition one weekend and Arkansas's might be the next weekend. And if our teams are talking about it, it is very easy, and it has happened in the past where teams would find out ahead of time. So just to be safe, we say talk about it after World Finals. So please don't push your teams to give you details because some of them might want to anyways, so if you could just encourage them not to, we would really appreciate that. The biggest takeaway that I have for you is just to practice with your teams. Like I said, there are lots of resources and examples available online. And the more you practice with your teams, the more comfortable they'll be on the day of competition, and the more fun they'll have, and probably the more successful they will be. So I hope that that helps, and thank you again for volunteering your time.
Okay, so what a great change that all the students now or teammates can go into spontaneous. That was always a big thing on our teams. It's like, oh, who's going to go in, who's not? So it's exciting, but it also makes it a little bit more challenging, especially if you have a newer person on your team that has not done as much spontaneous as the others. So that just makes practice even more important. So, you know, take those team members, assign them each week to take home a spontaneous box and bring it back. That doesn't all have to be on the coach. You'll get a variety of problems that way. And so it's just a great way to encourage participation on your team, get them excited about the spontaneous problems, and they can bring the spontaneous box maybe back to the next team meeting so that they can present it to their teammates. It's just a great way to get everybody involved. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about, Mike actually mentioned how important the program guide was. So I am going to go to my screen share again. And I just want to point out a few things in the program guide. Sorry, somehow it got ahead of me. It's got a really big lag. Okay, so some tips for the program guide. Number one, I, as a new coach back many years ago, did not realize the importance of probably the program guide. It was just one more thing that I received that I just didn't have time to do. And as I went through my years of coaching, I realized, oh, wow, I could have learned a lot from the program guide. And there is a lot of good information in it. So I want to take just a couple of minutes and point out some of these things that are super duper important. The whole program guide is extremely important, and it's very, very helpful to new coaches also. But there are a couple things that consistently we need to point out to you guys, because these are the things that we see in competitions that can sometimes cause problems for teams or challenges for teams. So I do want to just go through a couple of these pieces of the program guide. As you can see, some of them are here. I'm going to go through the program guide. I'm going to open it up and just show you guys a few things that are really important. Okay, so, but it's opening up. Okay, so as you'll notice, you have the table of contents, which makes it really, really quick to, you know, find anything that you need. But there are some sections I just want to point out, and I'm first going to go to page 6. The first stuff is just about, you know, what is Odyssey of the Mind. And then if you are a brand new coach or, you know, a seasoned coach, this is always good information. So basically pages 6 through 14, it's just about coaching your Odyssey team. Who can coach, the role of the coach, you know, being the coach. It's got some really good pieces of information for you. You know, how do you generate that interest? How do you really form your team? Meeting the parents. Parent involvement is a very important piece of Odyssey because you need those kids at your meetings, okay? Or maybe you need to have them help them sign in virtually if we get to that point. Making a schedule, you know, setting a calendar and sticking with that calendar. It helps the teams know when you're going to meet, how many times you're going to meet, and kind of what their time frames are. And then just training your team. And so here it talks about you as a coach. How can you help train your team? Okay, you need to teach teamwork. That's a focus that you have to work on. Teaching them how to be creative. And we will have lessons on this as we go through our training. But creativity, you know, kids can be taught creativity. I have absolutely no doubt that they can. And they can get stronger and stronger at it. I've seen much evidence of this in competitions where teams started out and they were like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. And by the time they ended up, they had an amazing creation. So teaching creativity is definitely a must. Brainstorming, that's going to be end up where you're getting some of your best ideas for creativity. So those are really things that you need to do. Okay, so again, those are just helpful hints. So it goes all the way through page 14 of just how do you be the best coach you can be. You know, there's functional fixedness, there's role playing. Role playing is invaluable on your team member, especially to help them break out of them being them on a team and them getting into a character on a team. You have to practice that. They have to realize that they are not on this stage. You know, 4th, 5th, 6th graders, they don't want to get up in front of anybody. They're embarrassed. So if you can have them become their character, then it's a whole different ball game. And it's really fun to watch that change in them grow. All right, and then if we skip down to page 22, let me skip down real quick to that page. This one talks about this is, on this page, there's long-term scoring. So if you have any questions at all about long-term scoring, it is right here on page 21. And on 22, style is always one of those things that's more challenging for people because they can understand the problem, but it's the style that really maybe throws new coaches for a loop because they're just not exactly sure what it is or what to judge, or can I judge this or can I not judge this? So this scoring piece becomes really important to understand, and we will definitely do trainings on this for you. And there's also one of those Odyssey academies that you can watch that is a great explanation of style. And then we'll show you examples, we'll pull up pictures and things and kind of tell you what some different types of style categories are. And then the next one that you'll want to know about definitely is clarifications. So I know a couple of the problem captains talked about clarifications, and these are ones that if your team is wondering if they can do something or if they can't, is it okay with the rules? Is it not okay with the rules? Or they need clarification on what to do in part of the problem. This is where you're going to take your team, and this page right here will tell you exactly how to do that, okay? So it is a very important part of your team, and it's working through the problem. Because sometimes you just don't know what the judges are really wanting or what they're really asking you to do, and this is a great way to find that out, okay? Or to find out if you can do something specifically in your problem. All right, and then I do want to point out there are some on page 28, sorry, I'm scrolling through this and it's probably making you go, woo. Going to competition. This is something that definitely you'll want to read through once or twice before competition. And, you know, pay attention to the door sizes at competition before you start your team. You know, we've got large vehicles this year, and I can personally tell you from my own experience. So my son's team one year, they decided to build this great big vehicle. And I said, boys and girls, have you read the problem? Have you checked the door sizes in your manual? I said, you might want to do that. Oh, no, we're good. We know it'll fit. Well, they had, after they built it, they had to redo it because it would not fit. So good life lesson in listening to their coach saying, well, probably should have done that, you know? So, and sometimes, you know, pull out that program guide and say, hey, have we looked at to see what the width of that can be? So sometimes they just don't think about things like that. They just want the biggest, best thing that they can ride. And then they're like, oh, it also needs to fit through a door. So, and, you know, we can't take the doors off. You know, I've seen that happen at competition, and that was not a good thing. So just be very careful that you read the door sizes. Okay, the next thing I want to point out are some of the rules at the competition site themselves. And they are going to be, sorry, I didn't write that page down. Right down at the bottom. Okay, program rules. And these are rules that your team has to abide by, and they can get penalized if they do not. So I would suggest reading the rules. I am going to point out 4 that are extremely important, and that is number 10, okay? That is the doorway measurement, 28 by 78, okay? And then 11 is checking in and staging. This is exactly what needs to happen in staging. And staging is that point right before you go on. Your team is waiting. Maybe one team's on the stage and your team is waiting and staging and they're talking to the judges. That's what this part is referring to. So it's that part right before your team performs. Okay, and then 17 is another one. Okay, and it is safety and damage control. There are very specific things you can use in Odyssey and things there are not. If you'll notice right down here on this section right here, it says the following items are not allowed. And that's lighter than air balloons, for example, helium, that are not sufficiently tethered or weighed down. Things that are very hot or cold, and you cannot use dry ice. Items that leave a residue. We are very honored by different organizations to let us use their buildings, and we want to leave them in the same shape that we found them. And so these rules have been put in place for that specific reason. We want a safe tournament, and we want, you know, to return those sites just like we found them. So you can see no flammable fuels, combustion engines, smoke bombs. All these things are really cool, but you just can't do an Odyssey. You know, fires in any form, liquids that can stain or cause floor damage, or emergency responses, anything like that, and hoverboards. Okay, that's a newer addition, I believe. Another thing that you'll want to do is read your use of batteries. Now, there's not a charge for batteries, but there are definitely certain batteries that you can and cannot use. Again, as a coach, hate to admit this, but we once used a battery that we weren't supposed to use. And it did kind of hurt our points just a little bit. So, you know, and I think we read it, we just didn't read it correctly. So I'm just giving you hints as a past coach, things that you'll want to avoid. So use of batteries, read this section carefully. Obviously, we're going to have stored power this year on one of our vehicle problems. So, you know, that is going to be kind of important right there. And the last one I want to point out is your membership sign. The membership sign has to be seen at all times in the performance. If it gets knocked over, pick it up, okay? You can accrue penalty points if it is not showing during the whole performance. So just, you might even take a sign sometime, knock it down during practice, make sure they pick it back up, okay? It's just a good training technique. All right, and then cost. Cost is always a huge one because, you know, sometimes it's hard to do these problems in the amount of cost without going over, so you have to get really creative, okay? And this part right here, this assigned value, this is on page 44 through 46. This will tell you all the things that have a certain cost for them. So, you know, you don't go over. You can also use garage sale priced items, you know, on common things if you truly got them at a garage sale. So you can do some great shopping. We used to go to secondhand shops and get all kinds of stuff for our teams. Now this is a great section right here. This is going to be one of your favorite sections. This is exempt items, okay? So this is going to show all the items that you do not get charged for. I would suggest reading this very, very carefully, okay? Because we see constantly teams charging costs for these, which they don't have to, okay? So trash items. This one right here is big. Anything that's discarded, like cardboard cartons, milk cartons, scraps of wood, anything altered from their original state are exempt from cost. So if it's truly a trash item, you can exempt it from cost, okay? And the last thing that I really want to point out, which is extremely important, is on page 53, and it is your glossary, okay? And it begins right here. Now you will see a list in your glossary of words pertaining to your problem, okay? So there's some listed on the back page, usually of your program itself. These are very, very important words. These are so people do not misconstrue something for something else in their problem, okay? So if you're being judged on, say, artistic quality, the judges are only looking at those distinctive characteristics, style, and effectiveness of the appearance of the visual attributes, okay? And we can talk more about this in a training later on, because these words right here can really make or break your solution, okay? All right. So the program guide, again, just make sure that you spend a lot of time on your program guide. All right, I am going to go back. See if I can get, sorry, my bar is in the way and I can't get to my X. All right, so the next thing that we will talk about we obviously have a really good chance of going virtual for teams this year, especially if I know in Oklahoma, COVID seems to be getting a little bit worse right now. We're hoping that that goes away really quickly. But I'm going to let Melissa talk about, she had a team that did some virtual creativity this year. And so, you know, as a team, you might have to meet on different training platforms if not everybody can meet at the house. So I'm going to let Melissa for a minute talk about different training platforms and maybe ways that you can train on those.
Okay, so a couple of things that, hang on, let me switch this. It's not showing my view. Actually, this says Martha, but it's actually Melissa speaking. So a couple of things that we experienced here at Jinx just last year, and then actually already this year, is how do we get our kids together so that they can continue to solve their problem and work on things and be ready for competition. And so we use Zoom for meetings, and we would gather the kids together and actually have a conversation. How are they doing? The first few minutes of it, we really just spent, how are you guys doing? And just kind of getting that personal touch back with the kids. And then we would go into, you know, what are you working on? What challenges are you facing? And just go through that process with the kids. And rehearsal for your solution is critical. We'll do an entire session on just preparing for virtual competition and how that looks and stuff. But there are different tools. Zoom is wonderful. You can record Zoom sessions, which is, we're recording this to be able to use it later. Google Meets is an option that's out there. I know some of the school classrooms will use Google Meets. GroupMe. So GroupMe is an app for your phone, and it works across all platforms, whether you have an Apple device or some other type of phone. It's a text messaging that allows the kids to share their thoughts. It actually provides a written transcript, if you will, of those conversations. I've gone back before and you know, pulled up my Google or my GroupMe session, and matter of fact, I just sent a couple of my kids a message this morning that said, how are you feeling? We have a couple of kids on quarantine. But in here, I don't know if you can see this, but it's GroupMe. The icon, it's, oh, that's not going to show up very well because of the light. Well, anyway, GroupMe, you can find it in your app store. But it's great. The kids talk back and forth. They can share ideas. They can share pictures. You know, I will oftentimes put reminders in there about meetings, communication, different things like that about what's going on. So it's a great tool for the team as well as you as a coach to use just to communicate and have that that record, if you will, of those conversations.
Okay, thank you so much, Melissa. And I am going to go back to my screen share. The last thing that we have for you today is some coaches training dates. So I am going to share those. Okay, so we are, last year, like Melissa said earlier, we had some Facebook training sessions, which this year I think we're going to go ahead and do them all on Zoom so that they can be recorded. All of our training dates will be listed on the coaches page of Facebook. They will all begin at 7:30. Okay, so that's a consistent time frame. So if you can't watch them, maybe you're putting your kids to bed, maybe you eat like dinner or something like that, they are recorded so you can see them at another time. So if you want to, you can take a snapshot of the screen right now just to kind of know when those trainings are going to be happening. If there is a change, for some reason, something comes up for Wendy or I, we will do a portion of some of these trainings. I think Melissa may end up doing a couple of these trainings on Zoom sessions. We may throw in an additional training here and there, but you'll notice they happen about every other Monday night. And we would love to have you join us. And also you can watch the Odyssey Academy videos. Those are fantastic videos, and those can be at any time that you choose. We want to help you, okay? We just have to know what you need. So if you are struggling in a specific area, then let us know and we will custom design a session for you. Or we can meet with you one-on-one. You know, I love helping coaches. That's just part of what I really enjoy doing, because you guys are giving up your time and your effort to make this happen. And so you're my heroes, okay? Because I know the difference that this makes for these kids. So in summary, I would just like to say thank you guys so much for coaching and helping our world, or our kids, become world-class creative citizens, okay? We know the difference that it makes. Our kids that started this in 3rd grade are now, some of them, they're off in college. One of them is in France. A couple of them are in Colorado. One's in Stillwater. One's in the Navy. So, and these kids were not afraid to go do any of that because of the experiences they had in Odyssey. You know, they're not having a hard time their first year at college because they've been on college campuses. They know how to make friends. They know how to find solutions to problems that they're encountering in college right now. And it's not just our college kids, it's our elementary kids, it's our middle school kids. Gosh, you guys, I cannot tell you the difference that I see in these kids that have been through this program. So thank you for being a huge part of that. And if you ever need any information, get on the Oklahoma website and contact one of the board members. I know Wendy and I are more than willing to help you. You just need to let us know that you need help. So again, thank you. And this will conclude our Odyssey of the Mind training for today, but we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Goodbye.